Red Dead Redemption 2 is a game absolutely obsessed with loss. You just didn't notice while you're playing because you're too busy robbing trains, brushing your horse for the 9th time in a row, and accidentally punching a man into a river. But the whole time, quietly, this open-world Western game is taking people away from you. Some of them die, some of them ride off into the sunset and simply never come back, and some of them you lose without ever even knowing they existed. Because you rode past them once, at the wrong hour, and the window closed behind them forever. Red Dead Redemption 2 hits so much harder than other games, and honestly, look, that's kind of the whole reason we're all still here. This is an 8-year-old game. I'm still making videos about it, and somehow there's a whole crowd of you who keep showing up to watch. That still kind of blows my mind. So I just wanted to say thank you, genuinely, to every single one of you watching, commenting, and sharing your own take on the game. And I don't just let those comments sit there. I read them. I reply to as many of you as I can, because at this point, it doesn't really feel like a channel. It feels like a bunch of people who love the same game, talking about it together. Anyway, enough of the soft stuff. Let's get into it. Let's see Rockstar's psychological design at work. This game was built deliberately to make loss feel real. And here's the crucial part. This isn't a game where you get to go back and fix it. There's no load last save for a life. When someone is gone in Red Dead 2, they're gone. So today, we're rounding up every single person you will never see again. The ones the story rips out of your hands and the ones you quietly lose all by yourself. And yes, this includes Charlotte Balfour, someone most players never even met, and that's exactly the point. Grab a tissue, maybe grab 2, because by the end of this, you're probably going to want to reinstall the game just to go say goodbye properly. Let's start right at the beginning, with 2 people most players completely forgot they even lost. Davey and Jenny. The game opens in a blizzard, and before you've even figured out which button reloads your gun, people are already dying. Davey Carlander is slumped over a horse with a gut wound, clinging on just enough to reach Coulter. And then he's gone that first freezing night. Jenny Kirk took a bullet during that same desperate escape through the mountains and didn't even make it to Coulter alive. You never really knew them. The game doesn't give you the time to. And that's the whole point. The Vandalin gang is already bleeding members before the story has properly even started. Blink during that opening snowstorm and you miss them completely. They're the first 2 names on a list that, trust me, only gets longer. Sean MacGuire. Loud, cocky, ginger, and genuinely one of the funniest people in the camp. The gang just got him back after he was captured. Everyone's actually happy for once, and it feels like maybe things are looking up. And then you're walking through the streets of Rhodes, an ambush erupts out of nowhere, and mid-sentence, a sniper's bullet goes straight through Sean's head. No dramatic slow motion, no tearful last words. The game just takes its comedic relief and switches him off like a lamp while he's still talking. It's the moment Red Dead 2 teaches you a lesson it never stops repeating. This world does not do warnings. Kieran Duffy. Poor Kieran. The nervous ex-O'Driscoll who spent the entire game terrified the gang would turn on him, terrified his old gang would find him, terrified of basically everything, and honestly, fair enough. He tries so hard to belong. He finally starts to earn a sliver of trust, and then, during an attack on Shady Belle, Kieran comes riding back into camp on his horse, sitting up perfectly straight, holding his own severed head in his hands. His single biggest fear, the O'Driscolls getting him, delivered as literally as the game could possibly manage. Red Dead watched this man worry for 40 hours straight and then just went, yeah, that. Hosea Matthews. If Dutch was the gang's mouth, Hosea was its brain, the wise old co-founder, the one voice of reason who could actually talk Dutch down from a bad idea, so of course the game kills him at the worst possible moment. Outside the bank in Saint Denis, Agent Milton, working for the Pinkerton agency, drags Hosea out and executes him in the street, right in front of Arthur, purely to make a point. And the second Hosea hits the ground, the gang loses the one adult in the room. Pretty much everything that spirals out of control after this, every reckless, paranoid, doomed decision Dutch makes, happens because the one man who could have stopped him is laying dead on the cobblestones. Lenny Summers. Smart, sharp, brave, and kind. Genuinely one of the best human beings in the entire gang. If you played the game, you remember the drunk night out with Arthur, one of the funniest, warmest scenes in the whole story, which is exactly why it hurts when, during that same disastrous Saint-Denis bank job, Lenny gets shot in the chaos of the escape. Hosea used to call him Mr. Summers with real affection. And Red Dead 2 does the thing great tragedies always do. It takes one of the purest, most decent people in the story and makes sure the good ones go first. Molly O'Shea, Dutch's lover, right up until Dutch stopped looking at her. Ignored, isolated, and slowly falling apart, Molly spirals into paranoia and drink, convinced the whole camp is whispering about her. And then, one night, drunk and desperate, she storms into Shady Belle and screams that she sold the gang out to the Pinkertons. Except she didn't. It's a lie. She made herself the villain because being the villain was better than being invisible. At least then, somebody was finally looking at her. Susan Grimshaw didn't ask a single question. She just raises her shotgun and fires. Molly wanted to be seen one time. It got her killed. Susan Grimshaw. Speaking of Susan, she's the iron spine of the entire camp, the one keeping everyone fed, clothed, working, and vaguely in line while the men run around shooting things. Nothing in that camp functions without her. So when Micah's treachery finally boils over at Beaver Hollow, Susan does the most Susan thing imaginable. She grabs a shotgun and marches straight at him to sort it out herself, and Micah guns her down. The woman who held the whole family together, killed by the rot growing inside it. Somehow, that feels worse than any shootout. Angelo Bronte, the slippery crime boss of Saint-Denis. All silk suits, smiles, and betrayal. He plays Dutch like a fiddle, sets the gang up with a trap of a robbery, and generally has it coming from a mile away. So the gang storms his mansion, John knocks him out cold, and they haul him out onto a boat in the swamp. And when Bronte comes to and starts running his mouth, insulting him, telling him he's nothing, Dutch just snaps. He grabs Bronte, shoves his head under the water, and drowns him right there in the boat. Then he tips the body over the side, where an alligator drags it under, while Arthur and John look on in pure horror. It's brutal, it's completely unhinged, and it's the precise moment you realize Dutch has lost the plot entirely. Bronte was a snake, no argument there, but the way he goes out is less justice served and more warning sign flashing in enormous red letters. You will never see Angelo Bronte again. Dutch and that alligator made very sure of it. Eagle flies. The young son of a native chief fighting to protect his people's land from the army and the oil companies circling it. In his final chapter, Arthur, one dying man, tries to help him, one doomed cause lending a hand to another. But Eagle Flies is too full of rage and grief to wait for a smarter plan, and in the raid that follows, he takes a bullet in a fight he was never going to win. He dies in his father's arms. It's one of the game's quietest tragedies. A good young man betrayed by history itself, long before he ever got to see his people free. Arthur Morgan, and now the big one. The goodbye the entire game has secretly been building toward from the very start. Voiced by Roger Clark in a performance that somehow makes you forget you're playing a character at all, Arthur is the beating heart of Red Dead Redemption 2, and this game is technically the prequel to the original Red Dead Redemption from 2010, which means we already know how this world ends long before Arthur does. When Arthur is diagnosed with tuberculosis, everything changes, because from that moment, Red Dead Redemption 2 quietly stops being a game about a gang and becomes a slow, 40-hour goodbye to the man you've been playing this whole time. He stops chasing money. He starts trying to be better. He gives what he can to the people he wronged, and depending on how you've played him, his final moment is either a brutal end or a man watching one last sunrise, finally at peace. Either way, he dies. This isn't losing a character. This is losing yourself. It's the one death in the game you can see coming from hours away and can't do a single thing to stop. Now, every person we've talked about so far, the story took from you. You had no choice. But here's where Red Dead 2 gets genuinely cruel, because some of the people you'll never see again, you lose entirely by your own hand. You lose them not by showing up, and this is where the game's psychological design becomes almost uncomfortable, because it holds you responsible in ways most games never dare to. Charlotte Balfour. Out in the woods near Roanoke Ridge, there's a widow living completely alone. Her husband is dead, and she has no idea how to hunt, fish, or survive out there on her own. And she's not going to last long. But if you find her, Arthur can quietly take her under his wing, teach her to hunt, help her get on her feet, check in on her over a few visits. It's one of the most tender little arcs in the whole game. And here's the gut punch. If you never go looking for her, if you just play the main story and ride on by, most players finish the entire game with no idea she ever existed. And depending on how much you did or didn't help her, she may not even survive to the epilogue. Your not showing up is the reason she didn't make it. You didn't kill her, you just weren't there. And in this game, sometimes that's the same thing. The Vampire of Saint Denis. Yes, Red Dead Redemption 2 has a vampire, and no, most players have never met him, because finding him is an absolute mission. First, you have to track down 5 creepy little writings scrawled on walls scattered all across Saint Denis. Find all 5, and the game draws a crude pentagram in your journal pointing to one specific alley. Then, and this is the part that gets everybody, you have to stand in the exact alley between midnight and 1 in the morning. Do all of that, and you'll catch a pale figure who claims to be centuries old, calmly drinking the blood of some poor unlucky bystander. Miss any single step and you'll finish the game convinced Saint Denis's biggest problem was the police. Which, to be fair, is also true. The woman at Crawdad Willie's. You're riding near Saint Denis when a bleeding man staggers into the road and begs you to help. His wife's been kidnapped and dragged off to a shack in the swamp called Crawdad Willie's. So you gallop out there, and you can hear her screaming inside, but here's the thing. If you charge in, and you die, if one of the kidnappers stabs you before you clear the room, that's it. She's gone. Ride back and there's no shack full of screaming, no wife, no kidnappers, no sign that any of it ever happened. The swamp just swallowed her whole. No respawn, no second attempt. The frontier does not do do-overs. La Llorona. Deep in the bayou, late at night, you can sometimes hear a woman softly crying somewhere out in the dark. And if you're brave, or stupid enough to follow the sound through the swamp, you'll eventually find her standing alone by the water. And the very instant you get close enough to ask if she's okay, she pulls a knife and lunges at you. She's the weeping woman of old folklore, and she's the kind of encounter most players trigger completely by accident, scream out loud, and then never manage to find again. So if you've heard crying in the bayou and thought, that's probably nothing, congratulations, you dodged a knife and missed a ghost, all at once. Gavin. Somewhere around Saint Denis, you'll run into a frantic Englishman named Nigel, wandering the roads, absolutely desperate to find his missing best friend, a man named Gavin. He'll grab you, ask if you've seen him, and shout Gavin's name off into the trees. He's completely heartbreakingly certain that Gavin is out there somewhere, just around the next bend. And here's the twist. You will never find Gavin. Not ever. Players have spent literally years combing every inch of the map, dredging the swamps, scaling the cliffs, searching the rivers, and Gavin is simply not in the game. He's the one person on this entire list you'll never see again for the funniest possible reason. Nobody has ever been able to see him in the first place. Poor Nigel is still out there right now, still wandering, still calling that name into the dark. Some goodbyes never even get a hello. The strangers whose stories end when the chapter does. Here's the one that quietly costs players the most. Red Dead 2 is stuffed with side characters whose entire storylines just expire. The moment the gang packs up and moves to the next camp or the chapter clicks over, a whole batch of these stranger quests silently disappear, sometimes forever. The doctors Arthur's sent to collect from, the doomed pairs of lovers, the eccentric one-off weirdos scattered across the map, each with a little arc of their own. If you don't finish their stories in time, you'll never find out how they ended, because for you, they just stopped, mid-sentence, and the game rolled on without them. You didn't get a sad ending, you got no ending, and somehow that's worse. Mary Linton, Arthur's great lost love. The one who got away, and then kept getting away. All through the game, she drifts back into his life asking for help, and every single time, you can feel how much he still cares. But their timing is always wrong. She comes from a respectable world Arthur could never fit into, and he can't leave the only life he's ever known. By her final letter, she's simply gone, moved on, out of his reach for good. No shootout, no grave, just a love that quietly runs out of road, because sometimes the person you'll never see again is the one you wanted to see the most. Uncle. The game's laziest human being, professional napper, chronic drunk, and the man who single-handedly polarized the word lumbago as an excuse to do absolutely nothing. Against every possible odd, Uncle survives the entire collapse of the gang, and then, in the epilogue, when Butcher's Hope comes under attack, lazy old Uncle picks up a gun and goes down fighting to protect John's wife and son. The one man you were certain would die face down in a ditch of his own making instead goes out a genuine hero. You'll never see him again either, but at least he got to choose how. And then there are the ones who simply ride away, because not everyone you lose actually dies. When the dust settles, Dutch vanishes up into the mountains, a hollow ghost of the charming man he used to be, and the next time your paths cross, he's barely there at all. Charles rides north to build a quieter life somewhere new, and Sadie Adler, who never once learned how to stop chasing danger, disappears into the bounty hunting life and out of your story for good. They survived. They made it, but they still walk out of your world and never really come back, because sometimes you'll never see them again doesn't mean a grave. Sometimes it just means they chose a different road, tipped their hat, and rode off down it without looking back. So here's the thing about Red Dead Redemption 2. Most video games are power fantasies. You get stronger, you win, you save everyone, roll credits. This one isn't that. This one is about loss. It's about a dying way of life, a dying gang, and a dying man, and it makes you feel every single person who slips out of it. That's not an accident. It's the emotional design of the whole thing. Rockstar Games built an open-world western not to make you feel powerful, but to make you feel grief. And Roger Clark's performance as Arthur Morgan is a huge part of why that grief lands as hard as it does. Some of these people you never could have saved, no matter what you did. And some of them, Charlotte, the strangers, the woman in the swamp, you absolutely could have, if you'd just shown up in time. That's the part that stays with you. The game quietly reminds you that in its world, exactly like in ours, you don't always get a proper goodbye. Sometimes you just look up one ordinary day and notice that somebody's chair is empty, and it's been empty for a while. So next time you boot it up, do yourself a favor. Go find Charlotte, ride out into the swamp, talk to the strangers before the chapter clicks over and takes them with it. Say your goodbyes properly while the window's still open, because in Red Dead 2, that window is always closing, and it never opens twice.